Hello, I'm Charlotte Cohen and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Thursday the 15th of January. And what results we had in the Premiership last night.
I'm looking at Celtic now. I need more movement in the box. They're going to score now, you know that.
And it comes in. Oh, it has! It's gone in! A corner from Engels. Nygren celebrates!
Celtic not at their best as they overcame a spirited Falkirk, and there was more drama as St Mirren visited Tynecastle.
It's Kizirides for Spittle inside the box. Into the middle, a goal! Laurie Shagland puts Hearts in front. 10-man Hearts!
Hearts reduced to 10 men again, and they find a way to win again. And the pace of the January transfer window picks up as clubs start to make moves.
As the transfer window trundles on, a couple of signings in Dundee. The Blues have brought in English right-back Brad Halliday, while Dundee United have signed wing-back Neil Farrugia.
We've got the lowdown on all of the Scottish football news.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Alongside me this morning, Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer at large. Stephen, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Charlotte. Remarkably well, all considered.
Good stuff. Well, there's plenty to get into this morning. Let's start at the Falkirk Stadium. The hallmark of Celtic under Martin O'Neill, Stephen, grinding out a victory, grinding out the 3 points, albeit a far from convincing performance.
Yeah, and that's the key. I think it felt very much like Martin O'Neill's first interim spell in charge. When you remember, they went to St Mirren and Callum McGregor smacked one in the injury time, and they didn't play at all well. They weren't convincing, but that should surprise no one because the squad clearly isn't up to it and needs reinforcements. And Martin O'Neill is effectively trying to apply a sticking plaster. He is papering over the cracks. And I think the one thing you would say is that yes, Celtic were not great last night, but under Wilfred Nancy, I think there's a very good chance they would have lost that game. They just wouldn't have won it because they would have imploded at the back. I mean, Falkirk had some wonderful chances in the first half. They will be kicking themselves black and blue for not managing to take any. I think you have to give credit as well to Kasper Schmeichel, watched by his father Peter from the stand. I mean, he's been a much maligned figure this season, Schmeichel, but he pulled off a really big save late in the second half that kept it at 1-0, and despite some ropey defending, despite barely threatening Falkirk in meaningful terms, Celtic won a big 3 points at a very difficult venue.
You mentioned Kasper Schmeichel there. He has, as you say, come under a heck of a lot of criticism recently, but do you think last night was maybe going away to kind of silencing some of that?
Well, one of the things people always talk about is they feel as if Kasper Schmeichel maybe isn't as fit and conditioned as he should be. Now, I have no idea whether that's the case or not, but people are quick to pass judgments in this part of the world. That is the nature of the beast. People are very pass remarkable. And he has had some howlers recently. You know, it started with the Scottish Cup final, where obviously he allowed a cross to squirm under him, and there's been, he wasn't great for the third goal against Rangers, for example. So I think he owed Celtic a performance. I think he gave them one last night, and you need that. All these guys are there for a reason. They're there to do a job. And when the attackers who clearly aren't on top of their game, I mean, I look at Sebastian Tinecti and you're thinking, what is it Celtic have seen that has persuaded them to pay £4.5–5 million for a left winger, and in fact to pay the same amount for another left winger in Mikael Ange Balikwisha, none of whom look as if they are contributing anything in terms of assists or goals or particularly positive play. I mean, Tinecti last night appeared to being incapable of getting past a fullback. And then, of course, you've got the money they spent on two Japanese players, Shin Yamada and Inamura. Inamura's already gone back on loan to Japan. Yamada is nowhere to be seen. And you think to yourself, well, I think in this window, the recruitment needs to be better. I think at the moment, fans would settle for any recruitment at all, to be honest with you.
I suppose that the other issue is the striker issue. I mean, Maeda has been starting in that position. It was Nygren who scored last night. A year, I think, since Kyogo left, and there's still just no sign of any replacement coming through the door.
Well, they tried to replace Kyogo with Kyogo, didn't they? I mean, obviously, two windows, they've not had any adequate replacement, and the solution to that was to go back to Kyogo and ask him to come back. Now, he decided that he would rather stick with Birmingham City, and that was slightly vindicated. On Saturday, we scored his second goal for him against Cambridge United, scored the winner, a 3-2 win. So it doesn't look as if he's going anywhere. I'm going to be in a bit of a minority, and I feel a bit for the recruitment team at Celtic. That's words you won't hear very often because I think Paul Tisdale, the head of football operations, who was sacrificed along with Wilfred Nancy, left a mess behind. That's what you hear from people, that the recruitment system was not fit for purpose. And whereas I think you see other teams like Hearts and Rangers who are well ahead of the game, who've been planning for quite some time. And look, Rangers have had their disruption as well with the departure of Kevin Fairwell, the sporting director. They've been planning those transfers for some time. Whereas the sounds of Celtic have had to pretty much go back to the drawing board. So they've ripped up this Paul Tisdale list of targets and gone back to starting again. And it looks as if they are going to try to apply a number of sticking plasters via loan deals, which, is probably sensible in the current circumstance because, they're probably going to have a new manager coming in the summer. So, I think they have to get cracking and they have to sign well, and there's no guarantee they can do either at this stage.
Well, before we continue, Rory Loy has just joined us. Rory, good morning.
I'm relieved to see you, man.
Stephen was ready to do the whole thing alone, so he's a relieved man.
I do apologise. I normally set my alarms for the start of the week.
We've all been there, Rory. We've all been there, I can assure you.
I had the podcast in for Tuesday, and then I had to reset it for Thursday, and then I set it for 6:10 at night, and I've just had a nightmare. Sorry, apologies.
Well, you're here now, so
yeah,
it's all good. Well, we're talking about Celtic and their lack of transfer activity, obviously getting the win last night, but I mean, just your take on it, Rory, this whole fiasco of not having a striker, the centre-back situation, recalling Stephen Welsh. What have you made of Celtic's transfer activity?
It's difficult to make much of it when they haven't done very much. I think they're in a bit of a precarious position because, I know it's been a crazy season, but I'd bet my bottom dollar that Danny Rule and Derek McInnes will be there at the start of next season. So it's possibly easier for Hearts and Rangers to recruit because they'll know who they're going to have in charge. They'll know the formations they're going to play. I think if at board level, if Celtic make the decision that they're going to stick with a 4-3-3 moving forward, it's easier to bring in more permanent signings. If they're still unsure who's going to be in there in the summer, it becomes more complicated and more difficult. You're looking at more short-term solutions, which they may be looking at anyway. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to Celtic, but the problem they've got is the expectation level is now through the roof because it was such a poor summer transfer window, and you couple that with the fact that they've not signed a striker in so long, and that expectation was a striker to be through the door on the 1st of January. So I think from Celtic's point of view, they need to act quickly, but from their point of view, they'll say, well, we don't want to act quickly just for the sake of it. We need to get the right people in.
I think you had a nail on the head there, Rory, which is, I mean, who would have believed that we'd be sitting here on Thursday, January the 15th, with Celtic still not having a striker in, when they've been searching for one for so long? And I repeat that, I think Paul Tisdale left a mess. I think they have had to go back to square one. But there is real pressure on him now, isn't there? There's a real pressure on him to go and fix this mess, which is entirely of their own creation. And it will be fascinating to see where they finish up at the end of this month, because halfway through, fans are deeply dissatisfied.
Yeah, and I think Martin O'Neill said yesterday, he's obviously constantly being asked about in pressers and in pre-match and post-match about the transfers. And I think it was last night he said by the end of the window, they expect to have players in, and it's kind of like, that's still 2 weeks away and Celtic have big games coming up. So you can understand the fans' frustration and the kind of the pressure that they're putting on the board to try and act, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte, see if they wait to the end of the window and they lose at Tynecastle, could be too late.
Yeah.
They they go to Ibrox on the 1st of March, who the Rangers have recruited early. And if they go 9 points behind Hearts with a trip to Ibrox around the corner, and they look back and they go, well, if we'd only been signed 2-3 weeks earlier, the fans are just going to be seriously unhappy, because it's just a case of wash, rinse, repeat in terms of the transfer windows now. They have had some really successful windows over the last number of years, last decade. I think it was Ange Postecoglou in January was still behind in the league, and they signed the likes of Maeda and Matt O'Reilly. So it can be a big window, but I think the uncertainty at Celtic's making it difficult. I think they potentially had a list of recruits for Wilfred Nancy's style of play. I think they've had to rip that up, and they've went back to the drawing board, back to the well, and I think they're maybe 5 or 6 steps behind everybody else at this stage, which makes it incredibly difficult, especially in January. So, from Celtic's point of view, somehow Martin O'Neill managed to get a result last night. Somehow he managed to get a result. But from Martin O'Neill's point of view, he won't want to stand on the edge of the pitch for the next 15, 16 games with that knot in his stomach going, there's not a lot I can do here.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Rory Loy. I mean, on one hand, they start off trying to sign players for Brendan Rodgers months ago, draw up that list, and they rip that up and they go back to trying to sign players for a 3-4-3. The manager lasts 33 days, and as you say, they've got to rethink again. And that game at Tynecastle is a real litmus test now, isn't it? It's the 25th. And I think if they haven't got 2 or 3 players in by then I suspect the fans' anger will reach thermonuclear levels. And I think they'll be entitled.
Just looking at Falkirk, as Rory said, Celtic probably lucky to come away with 3 points last night. They offered plenty, particularly in the first half, right at the end. Do you think, Rory, that they will make the top 6?
I wouldn't be betting my mortgage on it at this point. I watched them on Saturday against St Mirren, and I thought they, make no mistake about it, the best team won the game. The first half really lacked quality, and that's not a lot. There's not a lot of times I've been at Paisley often throughout the season, throughout the last few seasons, and you don't often say that about St Mirren. Certainly, their visiting team, can vary, but I thought Falkirk were excellent. In the second half, Calvin Miller runs in behind, stretching the back line of St Mirren. They couldn't handle it, and I thought Lisa at right back was fantastic as well on Saturday. But they've got Aberdeen need to recruit a new manager. They've got Dundee United there, hot on their heels as well. Dundee have picked up a bit of form, so I think they're going to have a battle in their hands for top 6. It'd be great to see them do it, but I don't think they're anywhere close to home and dry just yet.
I suppose, Stephen, at the start of the season, John McGlynn probably would have bit your hand off to be even in these conversations, having just been promoted.
Absolutely. I mean, I sat with John McGlynn at Stadium an hour for best part of an hour last week, and he was making the point that obviously they came up. Some of the same players that were in League One, like Leon McCann and Aidan Nisbet, are still there. They've come through with them. He's kept the basis of the squad. They're playing the same way, but what they needed to do was they needed to get the balance right in terms of pace and physicality. They managed to add that in key areas in order to keep playing the same possession-based football that they've been playing, and they've done that really well. And they've been such an asset to the league. I mean, you can't always say that about teams that come up. I mean, Falkirk have come up with 5,700 season ticket holders, a brilliant atmosphere. You can say what you like about the pitch and so on, but they have been an absolute asset to the Scottish Premiership, and they've been a credit to themselves. And I think whatever happens now, short of an absolute collapse through the trap door, and that's not going to happen. I think this has been a really successful introduction to the top tier, not just for Falkirk, but for Scottish football.
Well, let's turn our attention to Tynecastle. Hearts ultimately eased past St Mirren despite that red card for Benny Beringame just, I think, 14, 15 minutes in. Another win, full of character for Derek McInnes' side. Craig Gordon started again after his big save in the previous game. Rory, what does McInnes do with Schwolow back? Gordon obviously hasn't really put a foot wrong. Who does he choose?
I think he'll choose Swalov. I think the longevity of the success he's had in the team this season. There's only one mistake really that springs to mind, which was the home fixture against Kilmarnock when Bruce Anderson followed up and equalised. I think Craig Gordon will be delighted that he's come in, made that save, and then kept another clean sheet on the back of it. I think it'll reinforce to Steve Clarke that he'll be ready regardless. But I just think Derek McInnes will honour what Swalov has done in the side for the first six and a half months of the season. And I think he'll bring him in. It might not be at Falkirk on Saturday. He might be the cup goalkeeper anyway, Craig Gordon, so he may well play on the weekend. But I think moving forward in the league, I personally think that Derek McInnes will bring Swalov back in. I could be wrong, but he's stuck with the same 11 so often, the same players so often this season, that I don't see any reason why he would change the goalkeeper based on one mistake for Swalov, which split opinion anyway as to whether it was a red card or not.
I suppose the other thing for Craig Gordon as well is if he doesn't play again in the league this season, he can at least, if Hearts do go on and win the title, he can look back on that game and think, I've actually contributed something massive to this.
I don't think Craig Gordon has an issue. I mean, we've already kind of touched on it there in terms of the World Cup. I mean, he's going to be there. If he's fit, he's going to be there. And I think we did see with that wonder save that he pulled off when he came on for Swalov that it doesn't matter if he's not playing games. Craig Gordon is Craig Gordon. I mean, there's been some talk that he needs to go on loan because that's what happens if players are trying to be in a World Cup squad and are not playing. I don't think he does need to go on loan. I don't think he will go on loan. I think we saw why Hearts want him around the place when he did come on and make that save and make such a contribution in the last two games. So I think he's going to be absolutely fine. Even if he goes out the team, you know, he might not be happy about it. I don't think it will impact on his World Cup prospects at all. He will be going to America if he's fit.
And what about Hearts transfers so far, Rory? Do you think they've been moving smartly this window, lining up pre-contract for the summer, getting a couple of players through the door already?
Yeah, well, I think other clubs will look at Hearts, and I think the more players that come in and hit the ground running and are shown to be a success, the likes of Braga, Casarides, etc. I think if these deals are getting done early and that continues to happen, other clubs will look at it and go, that is an incredible way to work. If you can do your business early, there's no point in doing your business early if, you know, your signings aren't doing well. But the fact that they've got this data analytics and all the things that come with Jamestown, they're signing players and it's working. But I also think they work really well collaboratively, Hearts, in terms of they don't just rely on that. They also tap into Derek McInnes' experience of the league. You look at the likes of Stuart Finlay, and I'm not saying these guys don't show up well on the analytics. They maybe do, but they're not analytics signings. They're Derek McInnes signings. Now you caveat that with dipping into the data, etc. You know, it's so far been a match made in heaven in terms of how successful it's been. And I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about the targets that Hearts are looking at and the ones they've brought in because they are so left field. But my goodness me, they've worked. So when you combine the knowledge of Scottish football that Derek McInnes has, the fact that players want to go and play under him who know him, and you add that, you know, sprinkle of stardust in terms of plucking players from all over Europe and costing you next to nothing, I think their transfer business has been nothing short of incredible.
I think it is interesting actually, that really, because I mean, speaking to Derek a wee bit about this process, and you know, the data tells you so much, but it doesn't tell you everything, does it? It never can. It needs to be a kind of a bit of both. And certainly when he was on holiday in America in the summer, he was doing Zoom calls with prospective signings. You know, Claudio Braga did a call with him, and he was like an excited puppy. He knew all about Edinburgh, he'd done his research, and he thought, yeah, he'll do for me. But there were one or two players he did speak to. And you know, he was talking about one, he was sitting with his arms folded as his entourage did all the talking, and he came off the call and said, not sure about that. So even if the data shows up from Jamestown that the player looks a really good find, I think if the manager feels that he's not going to fit well into the squad and contribute to the kind of atmosphere around the place, I don't think he's going to let it happen. So I agree with you. I think the collaboration is a key to why Hearts really look as if they've got real stability and momentum just now.
Just uncrossed my arms there, Stephen. Panicked.
I was going to hang up on you if you did. I was going to hang up.
Well, I mean, what about St Mirren? Because they lose the game last night, Rory. All of a sudden, they're starting to look like they're in serious bother.
They do. I mean, on Saturday, their midfield was decimated. Gogic was suspended. Mark O'Hara was out. Keanu Bacchus was out. Killian Phillips went off injured. Liam Donnelly went off injured. And they were left with a midfield that just looked unrecognisable. I was disappointed young Fraser Taylor didn't have more of an impact on the game. I like watching him. I think he's technically good. But they just, they lacked so much in terms of that experience, that power, that height, that presence. Shamal George and goals had to go off as well. So I felt for them a bit on Saturday. I know Shamal George was back last night and they had Gogic back as well. Going down, the opposition going down to 10 men so early in the game. These players and Stephen Robinson they've been at Tynecastle many times. They've picked up great results here, there and everywhere since Stephen Robinson's been there. They would have seen that as an opportunity. That should have been an opportunity. But, you've got to give Hearts the credit. They've went and won the game. But I still think there's nothing worse as a footballer that having nothing to play for. And I've just got this feeling St Mirren, I don't think they'll go down. I really don't. I think they'll finish in the bottom two once they get their players back. But they've got this real potential now of floating about in no man's land. That bit. Nobody wants to be in a relegation battle. Of course they don't. But what's just above that in terms of, footballers is you don't want to have nothing to play for. And I've got a horrible feeling St Mirren may end up comfortably in 7th or 8th come the split and not have an awful lot to play for between then and the end of the season, and that is not what St Mirren are used to recently.
Let's have a look at some transfers. We're well in the midst of the January window. Things seem to be picking up over the last couple of days. Both Dundee sides making moves. Dundee signing right back Brad Halliday, United bringing in wing back Neil Ferrugia, both from the lower leagues in England. Stephen, do you think they're the kind of players that fans would be hoping to see through the door?
I think sometimes when clubs sign players in the lower leagues in England, the enthusiasm of fans is constrained. But yeah, I think that the one thing you always hear about January is that it's a difficult market. Supporters don't always take that as mitigation. They don't really want to hear about market conditions as an excuse for the club's not doing much, as we've seen particularly at Celtic. But absolutely, I think it'll be mainly loan signings. Rangers have made a really eye-catching one with Andreas Skov Olsen, Danish international from Wolfsburg. That's the kind of signing that gets fans off their seat, but it's difficult to do in January. But I think, Hearts and Rangers are leading the way. Rangers have obviously spent 4 million on Chukwueze from Sturm Graz, 3 million on Tuel Romans from Westerlo. They are throwing the kitchen sink at it because they see that there's an automatic Champions League place potentially up for grabs if they can get themselves above Hearts. But you know what? We're at the halfway stage now, 22 games. Hearts always said that if they went 2 rounds of fixtures against everyone and they were still in the title race, then they would consider themselves challengers. Well, we're there now. And it really is going to be about who recruits best now, whether anyone can recruit better than Hearts and really pose a challenge.
Is there anyone, Rory, that's kind of caught your eye in any signings that have come in? I know Stephen mentions Olsen, who Rangers are linked with, but is there anybody who's maybe caught your eye this window?
I think no specific signing necessarily, but I think the investment at Livingston and the money that's going into that club. The chairman was in Sports Sound at the weekend and he's very enthusiastic. They've brought Scott Arfield in. Apparently they're looking to bring a few more in. David Martindale will have no idea what's going on because he'll not be used to this. So I think in terms of Livingston and going down to the other end of the table, I think the likes of Kilmarnock and maybe Dundee, obviously they're on a good run and things, but they'll be looking at Livingston and saying, here, they'll be going to their chairman and saying, look, if we want to stay in this league, we're going to need to act because Livingston are a different animal, potentially, between now and the end of the season. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how much their new signings can impact the league and if they can pick up a few more wins and a few more points.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Rory and Stephen, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll catch you again very soon.
It's petty, it's ill-informed.
Are President Trump's cuts having an adverse effect on research?
It's pandemonium.
What number's that in the periodic table?
PD, number 47. I don't know.
I've done the shooting clays before. The longer you do it, the sorer obviously it gets.
When Craig said there he'd been shooting the clays, I imagined him out a back line. Somebody's washing, you know.
William Shatner, his secretary, contacted me to say, when Bill has a question now and again, can he contact you? And then one time he called me up and he wanted to know, David, what is a photon? I'm thinking, this is incredible. Captain Kirk wants to know what a photon is, you know.
I once met a guy who referred to a globe as a bomb app. A bomb app.
A bomb app. Look at the bomb app.
What we normally do is spin the bomb app and we see where we go on holiday.
The Off the Ball podcast, available every Monday on BBC Sounds.